Once was a swagman camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree. As he sat, as he watched and waited while his billy bawled, "Who'll come a waltzing Matilda with me?" Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnie Luks here at the Crossroads. Evening forum, councils at the Crossroads. And I'd like to welcome Ken to the forum. Welcome, Ken.
Yeah, good evening, Arnie. Nice to be with you.
And Don Auchterlonie from Victoria. Welcome, Don.
Hi, Annie. Good to see you.
Good to see you both too. All right. So what's current in the news at the moment is that councils are struggling to dispose of recycled waste. They're struggling. I found it interesting, this whole story of recycling, because what we've got is certainly a lot of energy is being put into the environment as an argument for sustainability, for minimising our carbon footprint, for recycling our waste so that it can be reused. And then, as I understand it, China is taking our waste, and now they've refused to take it. And I'm thinking, okay, are we full of humbug? Or is there a valid reason for us to get all this produce from China and then send all our waste back to China? Is there a valid reason for that? Why don't we just make these things ourselves? And we've seen our industry shut down and that sort of thing, and it's just it doesn't make sense. Not environmentally, especially if we're trying to minimise our carbon footprint. Anyway, let's open the fray, open the forum. Don Auchterlonie, you're up.
Yeah, well, in our area, there's a proposal for waste of certain type to be used as fuel in the paper mill. The paper mill can use a certain amount of waste with their normal fuel, which takes it out of the garbage trucks, and it suits the paper mill and it suits the councils who have to deal with this sort of stuff. And a lot of that sort of thing has been going on for years. In the power stations, they've been burning a certain amount of waste in some of the power stations, which is quite a good thing because it has a double benefit.
Okay, right. Thanks for that, Don. And that does make sense. If you're going to you've consumed a product, or you've consumed the packaging of a product, and then it's recovered and perhaps pelletized or something like that, and then put into a furnace and use the heat energy for it to convert it to electricity. That makes good sense, and especially if it's done locally, because my understanding, and I was exposed to power generation in the industries I've worked in, my understanding is the closer you are to the power generation source, the more efficient the power line transmission or the underground cable transmission of that power is. And the further away you go, the less efficient it is. So these things are, to me, it makes good sense that if you're doing things locally and your power generation is done locally, and if you're using waste locally, that makes sense. Environmentally, it makes sense to me. All right. Ken Grundy, we're just bringing you up right now.
Only, I suppose it would be about 10 or so years ago, there was quite an effort here to deal with waste, because prior to that, every council area had their own dump or rubbish collection site, and none of them were very attractive. They had to have chain mesh fencing right around. There were papers and plastics and that would blow around, and also they were a threat to the environment in our locality, because we've got aquifers supplying great water to the district, and you could never tell whether there'd be some of the nasties in the waste that would penetrate down into the aquifer. So environmentally, there was a big push to have huge rubbish receiving points, so much so that our waste now travels about 280 kilometres to a site which is an old limestone area where it's probably fairly safe. So that nowadays the local rubbish trucks just pick it up and they take it to the local town transfer station, as it's known, and there it's tipped into huge trucks and where it's all compressed. And then they cart it off this 280 kilometres, which also costs a fortune, you can imagine. But it's probably been an advantage environmentally. But okay, that's worked quite well for 10 years, but it is very costly. We pay nearly $1,300 a year to have our rubbish collected. Now that's all sorts of rubbish. That's recyclable and landfill. So I should have added that the only things that go to 280 k's is the landfill. We've got a recycling plant here where it's all separated, not recycled, but it's sent off in its various categories to recycle. Of course, now that China in particular has decided they don't want to take any more of our paper or plastic, it's thrown the whole system into chaos, and the recycled places are wondering what they're going to do with this stuff that normally went to China. So the option is it goes to landfill. Well, let's face it, it does have some value. China's obviously getting some value out of treating it. And the fact that they were freighting it all the way from Australia to China to do so, that indicates to me that there is some value in it. So at the moment, everyone's in a dilemma, and New South Wales, the local government there, has requisitioned from the government $47 million to deal with it. Victoria has got $13 million standing by ready for this purpose. South Australia has indicated that they want $7 million from our government. So there is close to $70 million that's just going to assist councils to bury a resource that has got some value. Now, I can't see why we couldn't duck over to China, have a look at the plant that they've been processing all the stuff in, and we could build several of them in Australia. And even if we only had 3, spread from the Queensland border through New South Wales to Western Victoria, for instance, and we could transport the stuff there and retrieve some of the value without this stuff being a burden.
Thanks for that, Ken. That's right. Being resourceful, taking the initiative, seeing something that's not actually being harnessed, the potential is there. And that to me is what industry is about. It's what the entrepreneur is about. And when we're so mindful, and I'm going to bring up a website here that environmental and emission trading, the Victorian government is talking about, are actually passing laws where they're going to police your home and the environmental footprint that you have on your home. And here we are with this waste, and it's an inconsistent position. It's an inconsistent position. If we're talking about optimizing energy, and we're talking about minimizing our environmental footprint, and all we've been doing is just putting all this waste in ships and sending it off to China and bringing it back as finished product of some other shape, I find that extraordinary. I find it inconsistent. It doesn't hold a valid argument. Why aren't we using it here? Why aren't we producing our own goods here? And this idea of the environment is everything, as if it's some sort of, with religious zeal, we're following it, and yet in it it's got a can of worms that's full of humbug. Don Auchterlonie.
Yeah, well.
Okay, we've just lost Don on that. Hopefully Don will come back in a minute. Just can you hear me, Don? Okay, right. You just dropped out for a second there. I'm just going to cut across to you now. Can you start again, please?
Well, there's another aspect to this question of waste. And there was a book written some time ago called The Waste Makers. And the companies, there was one company that made motor tyres that was quoted in this book, and their motor tyres were lasting for 40,000 kilometres, but their sales weren't good enough, so they were going out backwards. So they had a board meeting, and some bright spark said, well, if we made tyres that wore out in 20,000 kilometres, we'd sell more tyres. So they did this, and they had black figures in their book instead of red figures at the next financial year. So this is another aspect of waste.
Yeah, that's an excellent entry to the fray, Don, because that's the truth of it. Designed obsolescence. I can see it with because I'm a builder. I can see it actually within the construction of homes. When a home in the old days, the home was to a building standard, and now the light building code is to a different standard, and the home itself isn't as robust. It may have good thermal qualities, insulation qualities, but the fact is it's going to still be standing in 100 years, and not so. But it's not just homes; it's also cars. Cars have got a life cycle. Washing machines have got a life cycle, and of course, if that life cycle is coming in and in and in, that's designed obsolescence, and that in itself is, while it might be profitable for the manufacturer to sell more washing machines or more cars or whatever, the fact is that that's an environmental waste, and it's philosophically it's inconsistent with our environmental footprint. Now, I've just I've just done some brakes on a car, disc brakes, pads, and replaced the rotors on the disc brakes. And looking at it, to me, the design is a good, solid, robust design with a life cycle. And you might get 50, 80, even 100,000 kilometres out of a set of rotors and disc pads. And when I'm using my Troopy, which I didn't do the discs on, but when I'm using my Troopy, they can last much more. They'll last 150,000. And so obviously the design for the Troopy is superior to the design for the local sedan. And this is engineering. They make decisions on the life cycle. And to me, it's fundamental that we think about this. If we're going to be consistent in our in this green philosophy, this green religion, then everyone needs to buy themselves a Troopy, because it'll last 500,000 mile. The brakes will last 150,000 kilometres between brakes, and okay, it uses more fuel, but you can put more people in it too. All right, Ken.
I don't know if I've got a lot to add, except I totally agree with what you've just said. We've learnt for a long time ago that the economy is based on things wearing out more quickly. They could build a Rolls Royce that would last for years and years. Of course, you had to pay for it, but now the cars are getting cheaper, and there's not much steel in them. The panels are quite flimsy. I must say they don't rust as much as they used to, and the engines don't burn oil like they did. So the technology has been better in that regard. But you are always buying these spare parts, whether it's radiator hoses or brake pads and that sort of thing. So it's built-in obsolescence, and it's all designed to use resources. But the Greens, when I'm talking about the Greens, I mean the party people, you don't hear too much about them resisting that sort of thing. And of course, jobs, anything, they'll do anything to create a job, even if it's digging a hole and filling it again.
Right, thanks for that, Ken. Designed obsolescence, and of course the pressure of finance on companies. We haven't touched on that, but if you're going to actually look at this equation, this environmental footprint equation, then you've got to look at the money system, because if the car manufacturer isn't selling cars, if he isn't selling sufficient cars, then his profits are down. And he's going to go out of business, because there's so much competition out there, because there's so many high volume car manufacturers, and on the basis of that, the unit price comes down, but the life cycle, it seems to be hitting, in the old days it was 200, 300,000 kilometres, and nowadays you get warranties on the car for the 100,000. And if you're an owner of some of these new cars, psychologically, that's what the life you expect, that it's warranty for the life, but after that it'll fail. So the green position isn't consistent unless we look at the financial question and the pressure that's on industry. And we haven't actually touched on that, but I think that in order for us to do justice to the green argument, this whole idea of recycling, the idea of shipping it across to China and bringing it back again, and getting China to do our manufacturing instead of us doing our own manufacturing, these are all arguments that we've got to put on the table. And I don't know that we've done justice if we don't deal with the money question as well. Don?
Yeah, well, it all comes back to the money question in the last analysis. But the environmentalists should have their attention drawn to this, because it's something that they're ignoring, and I don't think they should be let ignore it, because they're making a whole lot of policy. They're dominating the making of policy in my local area, as far as the local council goes. But they don't seem to be willing to have a look at this, the financial aspect, the things that we've just been mentioning. They don't seem to have even thought about it.
All right, thanks for that, Don. I'm just going to cut across to our website again, library, and highlight there the Yarra Glen report. This was done, I think it was about 1958. Yeah, there it is. It's 1958 this was done. A conference of the Deakin Electorate Ratepayers Association. And in 1959 they presented this Yarra Glen report. And what it did was it highlighted about credit creation. It highlighted where councils could actually seek through a state bank, would be able to seek additional funds for infrastructure projects, and the state bank would release these funds on the basis that it was going out into the community, and the funds were, this is the proposal, and the funds would be as a one-off issue of credit for that particular project, and then the debt would be dissolved, if you like, over the life of the project. So to me, these are important points in our discussion that we haven't even touched on, and that is credit creation, the banks, councils financing projects, councils rate of increases. Unless we actually start to talk on it in depth, we're only superficially looking at this question of environment and environmental footprint. Now, I think we're going to just do one last lap here, but I think I'll give notice now that the next council at the crossroads, what I'd like to bring up is this question of credit creation, is the question of financing council and financing projects, and how it could be brought about where it is sustainable. If we want to be green and we want to be sustainable, okay, let's minimise our energy footprint, and let's look at how a proper financial policy and system could work to reduce our carbon footprint. All right, one last lap. Ken Grundy.
Yes, well, I suppose as a lead into the next one that you've just talked about, it really is this deficiency of purchasing power. And people who are prepared to have a bit of a look at it, they'll discover that in every manufacturing process, there is the amount of production that's gone out is greater than the purchasing power that's been distributed in the community in that manufacturing process. So there's always this little bit of a deficiency, which of course is multiplied many times through the whole economy. And we need to really make up that deficiency with some of that credit creation that you've just mentioned. And of course, local government could be one of the beneficiaries. So it'd be very important to tune into the next one. And Arnie, you might be able to incorporate a link to that video that we saw yesterday.
Okay, I'll make a note of that, Ken, that yes, when we actually go to the next forum and do recording. There's a few videos that are out there about money creation in the modern economy, and Crossroads has got one. We talk about the Bank of England and credit creation, but there was a recent video we saw. It's just released only this weekend, and it talks about the deficiency of purchasing power in the American economy. How when you take into account, and this person they've gone to the yearbook, they've gone to the statistics, and they've been able to substantiate through the official channels of information that while America issues so much in wages and dividends and salaries, it's insufficient to purchase what the industry makes. And in actual fact, I think it showed over since the 1950s that there'd been a drop of more than nearly 10% of the within the cost of manufacturing, within the price system of the finished component. More than 10% of the value had dropped in wages. So that means that there's less and less in the community to buy what the community makes, and that's inconsistent. One last lap, Don.
Yeah, we were talking about cars before. You see a lot of cars on the side of the road for sale. Apparently, we're all encouraged to change our cars over regularly, but it seems that you don't get much of a trade-in. So it seems to be more profitable if someone to put it up on the side of the road for sale, and they get a better deal. They get more money than they would from trading it in. And this is a bit of an irregularity.
I think what you demonstrated, Don, is what I try to do every time I'm doing any sort of trading or anything like that, is avoid the middleman. And but the thing is that this comes back to the same question: why are people attempting to avoid the middleman? I mean, the car salesman, he wants to be fair with the trade-in. I mean, he might be a little bit, but the fact is he's trying to be fair, and he's got to make a quid out of it. And that's the same with everyone else. They're all got to make a quid out of it, but the fact is there's not enough purchasing power in the community to buy what the community makes. And this is the subject that we're going to touch on, councils, next week. And if you want a heads up, go to our website, have a look, the Yarra Glen report. It's there in the League Library. You'll see it under Butler, Mr. Butler. You'll see it there, or you'll also see it under Crossroads. So if you go to our library, you'll see that it's not Crossroads, it's called Bankwatch, actually. Where is it? Over here on the left, Archives, Bankwatch. And from there you'll see the Yarra Glen report, which is over here on the right. So, and also that particular website, Bankwatch, is a very, very important story there with Jim Cronin and Bill Carey, of where they actually pursued the banks, and the banks were foreclosing across the Eyre Peninsula farmers. They were actually forcing them into interest rates of nearly 30%. We talk about, you want to touch on the Royal Commission today is another subject, but they were actually forcing the farmers into interest rates of 30%, and you wonder why a few of them were going to the wall, or a lot of them were going to the wall. But that's another story for another day. Thanks very much for joining us. Once was a swagman camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree. As he sat, as he watched and waited while his billy boiled, who'll come a waltzing Matilda with